the phrase, if we act locally, we act globally, I think it's true to a certain extent. I think sometimes people act locally, but they have no connection with what is happening in the next country, regionally, globally, or even in the next village where they're living. And so you are just acting locally, even if what you're doing is important. I think what's really essential and crucial in this sentence is that we need connections between groups. We need connections internationally, globally, and yeah, we live in a world where we can do this more easily than we used to. We can still make sure that local groups feel that they're part of a wider movement. And also the other way around, that wider movements support local groups. It's a two-way. And I think it's something that we can't forget, and that we can't imagine that it just happens on its own, that having these connections is actually a lot of work. And sometimes it's, for example, we're here in Kodrod. People from all around Europe have gathered to fight gas and support the local community that is fighting gas. On top of what we're doing here, we're also meeting one another. We're also finding out about different struggles. We're also gonna keep in touch afterwards. My name is Noélie. I'm an activist who's currently based in London, and I'm engaged in a collective called the Gastivist Collective. We started the Gastivist about 1.5 years ago now. We were a group of activists from different parts of the world that really got really concerned about gas, basically. We came from different movements that were fighting coal, that were fighting for economic justice, and we saw that there was a big gap in the movements around gas. So locally, there were lots of citizens or local groups that were starting to fight the construction of new pipelines, of new LNG terminals. And at a European level, there were bigger NGOs that were trying to do policy work, advocacy work, but there wasn't a movement. They were not talking to one another, they didn't know each other, they were not listening to one another. So what we thought was important was to basically get everyone to talk to each other. So try and create a network of people, try and show that if you're fighting an LNG terminal in Sweden, you're also connected to the Italians that are fighting a pipeline that is being built in the south of Italy. So that's what we started doing. We got people in touch, basically. I was working in Brussels in an NGO, and I was doing advocacy work on gas. And I realized that we were never going to make a difference if we couldn't show that there were lots of people fighting locally. The more I was going to advocacy meetings, the more I saw these representatives not really caring about what I was saying, because it was only me and my voice. If I could show that actually locally there were so many people fighting, they would have to take me seriously, and they would have to start shifting what they were doing. And I knew that there were local groups fighting, it's just that we were not in touch with them, and we couldn't invite them to come and talk, and we couldn't talk about what they were doing. So that's how the Gastivist started. So the United Beyond Gas Tour is a speakers tour that we organised with the Gastivists and other organisations. And we went to visit different infrastructure projects in Europe that were fighting gas, and also different groups that were fighting the companies and the banks funding the system. And we were lucky enough to have an amazing indigenous speaker come with us from Mexico, who was also fighting a gas pipeline in her communities, who came along. And she also said, sometimes local groups feel really small and tiny and isolated, and it's a bit like ants. They're tiny, 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 and they're fighting a huge system. But she was telling us about these ants that they have in Mexico that bite you and that are really scary. And while they're tiny, they can really scare a grown human. And so just to remember that even if we're tiny and we're fighting this massive system, it doesn't mean that we're powerless. We can be very powerful, and that we can be just like ants. We're loads of us, and we can make a difference. And I thought that was really beautiful.